Hey developers, today we're gonna look at incremental static generation. Now you're probably thinking, what is this, what's it all about, and what's the difference between that and static site generation? Don't worry, I have a guest on Learn to Code with James who's gonna explain all about incremental static generation using Next.js so you can deep dive and learn more about it. So without further ado, take it away, James.
Hey there, my name is James and I run the Learn to Code with James channel. And today I'm going to be showing you how to create a news curation application using incremental static generation. Now, if you've never used this before, it's a Next.js feature that allows you to use the benefits of static generation, but you can also scale to millions of pages that get created afterwards. Now, incremental static generation is really good for things like headless CMS or stuff that can be cached that isn't user specific. So in my example today, we're going to be using an API that only allows on the free tier every 30 minutes gives you new news data. The problem with using static generation in this version is if we use it, that means that nobody will get new data after we've built it one time. With ISG, this gives you the ability to essentially build it with the current data, and then when somebody visits a site, it will go and check based upon the revalidation time, and if it is after that revalidation time, it will go out with the API, check to see if there's new content, and then generate a new static site. And then you'll get the latest data the next time you visit that page. So this is super powerful for things that you don't have to have as a client-side request. I use this on my website, jamesperkins.dev, for all of my YouTube channel videos that you can find on the YouTube tab and my blog posts when I was using Sanity originally. So if this sounds like something you want to learn, incremental static generation, let's build a news curation site using MediaStack's API. So before we get started with our Next.js application, I should talk about the API that we're going to be using today, and that is MediaStack. And the way MediaStack works for free tier, it allows you to make 500 requests a month and also only gives you news data every 30 minutes. And the way that it works is you send down a request. For example, this would give you the news with your access key. Now we're going to do a media query that's only going to return specific language and countries. So we're going to set the countries here to US. We're going to set the language to English. And we're also going to set the publish date to the latest news first to make sure that we get the latest news at the top of our page. And we're also going to limit this to 25, which is the default amount that we can use. So essentially, this will allow us to create a website that only has the latest 25 news articles, giving the users the ability to read however they want from wherever they want. So let's move on to Next.js. So what I've done is created the Next.js application using the Create Next app through NPX. I've then removed all of the data that comes in the homepage and also installed Chakra UI as my UI framework. Now, if you want to learn about Chakra UI, I have a couple videos on my channel, but you can use any kind of UI that you want for this. I just need to keep it really simple so you get the important information without having to worry about CSS. So to begin with, let's talk about how getStaticProps works with revalidation. So the way that getStaticProps works is you create an async function, and this can be at the top or the bottom of a file, and it's called getStaticProps. And this is something that Next.js is looking for. Then you do something in here, so we'll just call this functionality for now. And then you return props, and inside of this props, you can return whatever you want. Now in our example, we're going to return the news. So for now, let me just create a const up here called news, and we'll just set test in here. So what happens is at build time, this functionality gets written and it builds out all the pages. So you can imagine that you go and set your Next.js app in Versailles to build, and it will go and run any of these on any pages. So if you have this on a bunch of different pages and it does a bunch of different functionality, they'll all run at build time and give you the application statically. Now, if you add something else to your return functionality, for example, revalidation, and then you set seconds here, what will happen is Next.js will build this at build time just as it would normally. And then what it does is it checks how often to go and check if there's new data. Now, if you set this to 1 second, that means every time somebody logs into your website, the odds are is that the last person, it's been a 1 second since they last visited this page. So you can imagine this as sort of a check to see, hey, has the last person been here? Has this time run out since then? If the answer is true, then I should go to the API and check to see if there's any new data. Then, if there is new data, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire off an incremental build and only build this specific page instead of your whole website. And then the next person that comes along will get served the new page. So this is a really great way of doing statically generated sites, but also have the functionality of being able to put in fresh data without building the entire thing. Now, this really works for headless CMS, or maybe you have an API that doesn't update very often. For example, I use the YouTube API on my website, and I only pull in new data that's statically built every time I publish a new video. So with that being said, we should create some functionality here. So the functionality that we're going to have is first we're going to have an API key. Now this API key is given to you when you sign up through MediaStack, and it's going to be in a .n file. So just go ahead and drop that in. I've called it news API key, but feel free to call it whatever you want. Then we're going to create a response here that's going to do an await, fetch, and then it's going to use the URL that's provided through MediaStack to make a request. So that's https api.mediastack.com/v1/news. So we want the news. Then we should provide them the access key. And that's going to be equal to $API key. Then we can state anything else that we want. So I'm going to set this to countries, and the countries is going to equal US, and language, or languages, should I say, is going to be set to, we'll set that to EN for English. And we're going to add a sort here equal to published _ descending, so we get the latest news. So now what we can do is set this news here equal to await response JSON, so that we're returning a JSON to the user. Then we can take this props and pass it into the home page. So to do that, we'll just do news, and then we can do something with it. So for now, we'll just do console log news. And then in here, I'll just have a div that says test, and that will work for the functionality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch this Next.js application and show you what gets returned from MediaStack using getStackProps. So I've launched the website, and as you can see, it says test up here, and then I have this data that contains any sort of latest news that's come from this ABM staff, because apparently there has been a bunch of movement in the currency world. And you can see it has like an author, it has a category, it has a description, a title, and the URL that we can send the users to. So we're going to use that to create essentially an articles component that we can pass this data into and use it to create our news curation website. So I'll meet you back on the other side where we can start creating our articles component. So the first thing we need to do is create a components folder. And inside that components folder, we need to create a new file, and we'll call this articles.js. And inside of our articles component, we're going to use a bit of Chakra UI to kind of help with the layout. So I'm going to import box, heading, and text. And those are all coming from Chakra UI. So we can do from at Chakra UI, but we'll change it to layout so we don't import everything. And then we can create a const here called articles. Now we're going to pass in some props, and those props are going to be what we just talked about. So we're going to have things like the author, we're going to have the date that it was published, the title, and then we'll also use the URL to make an href. Now, one thing to note is that the publish date is actually a string, so we can't format it in a nice way. So we'll handle that in a second. So first we're going to destructure the props. So we're going to take author, published at, and title, and URL. And we're going to equal that to props.data. And then we're going to create this publish date. And what we're going to do is to convert it from a string to a date. We're going to do new date equal to published at. And now we can actually return functionality here. So what we're going to do is we're going to return an href, and we're going to set the URL that we get from our props as the URL. And then to keep them, you know, on our website, because maybe we want them to check out a few different news articles, we'll make this open in a new tab, and we'll set our no opener and no referrer so that we can't have any people try and maliciously inject something into our site as we are doing some work. So it's no referrer. Can't spell today. No referrer. And then inside of this A is where we'll display our stuff. So we'll have a box here with a width of 50% of the screen. And MX is set to auto to allow you to have it in the middle. We'll also have a border width of a single pixel. And I guess we'll have a border radius so that it kind of looks similar to sort of what Dev2 does, or other sites you may see where they just have a list of articles. Then inside of that box, which is essentially just a div, we're going to do a single box to house everything else. And we're going to have some padding here of 6. Then inside of that box, we want a heading. Now this heading is going to be our title, but we don't want it too big, so we'll just have an H6. We'll set the size to medium, and we'll align the text right in the center of the screen. And then we're going to take that title, and then underneath that title, we'll have the text, and the text will be by, and then author. Now, sometimes with their API, they don't actually return the author. So if it's null, we're just going to write the words unknown author, which makes it really easy for us to handle. Then underneath that, we're going to have a box here. And inside of that box, we're going to have text. And the text is as a span. And I'm going to set the color to sort of a gray. And that gray font size, we'll make it small. And then what we can do is just have our publish date here too. So we can do published date dot to local string, and then we can set it to enus and hit save. So now we have this sort of articles. We just need to export this, so we can do export articles and hit save, and that will give us our articles component that we can use in this index.js file somewhere around here. So inside of here, what we want to do is essentially just have the data from here. So first, let's create a const here called data, and we can equal that to news. So we've destructured that now. So now we have the data. Inside of here, we're going to use a box from Chakra UI and just set the max width equal to 960 pixels. And we'll just put some padding around the size. And this is just for style, so it's not really overly important. And you can style this however you want. And I'd really love to see what people make with this API and the knowledge you've learned today. So feel free to do a pull request on my GitHub or send me a tweet, and I'll happily check them out. So I'm just going to do latest news stories. And then under that heading, we're going to have a box again, which is again just a div. We'll do the width is set to 100%, which will be 960 pixels or smaller. We'll set MX to auto to allow us to have it in the center. And we'll put a margin on the top and bottom of 4. Then what we do is essentially tell it that we're going to map through the data that is available here. So any data that comes from this properties, which comes from here, we want to map over. So to do that in Next.js or React, you can just data and data.map, and then we'll call it article. So article, and do an arrow function. And then in here, we can do our return. And we now have this new component called articles that we can pass data equal to article. And then hit save. So now we kind of have this latest news stories. Let's talk about exactly what's happening before you see it. So what's happening at build time, but we'll see this at dev for now. But if you check in the link in the description, you'll see that there's a website there, and it will be the exact deployment of this. So when you go to it, you'll see that it'll have different news stories than the ones we currently have. And we're saying to this, hey, pull in this data from the news, which is being returned by getStaticProps. Then go ahead and just display a heading with latest news stories. Then, if there is any data, let's map over that data, call it article, and then return an articles for each article. And then inside of our component here, we're taking that properties, that data that we're passing in, destructuring it and getting the author, the published at, title and URL, and saying we're going to make an A link for that and put the URL in. We're going to have a heading that's going to have the title of the article. We're going to tell you who the author is and when it was published by. So let's give this a shot and see what it looks like in Next.js. Okay, so here we are in our application, and you can see that now we have all these different articles. And if we select one of them, let's say, for example, 2 impaired driving arrests made over the weekend, we select this and it will take us to that news article, and the same again. Obviously, if we refresh the page right now, what happens is we get the latest data because getStaticProps is running every single time. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to deploy this application out, and then we're going to go and check to see if the data has been revalidated recently in the video. Okay, so here we are in the Versailles deployment. I deployed this 19 hours ago, so you know that it hasn't been changed since. So let's select this, and as you can see right now, the last article was last night at 7:59 and 42. Now, that means that we haven't seen any data since I deployed this. But if I refresh the page now, you can see I'm getting the latest data, and it didn't take any time at all. It's like immediately I got the new data, and that's because I set the revalidation to a specific time. It said, hey, the last time you visited was that long ago when you deployed, 19 hours ago. Hey, I should go and check for more data. I've quickly rebuilt this page for you, and now you have the latest data from today. So that's the end of this video, giving you a brief overview of how incremental static generation works and allowing you to create a news curation application with it. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to drop it a like, comment, subscribe to Erik's channel, and look in the description for my channel. Until next time, see ya!